Patient.
Thank you very much. And not only want to thank, pardon me, NAEMSE, but also everyone who's on the webinar, everyone who's going to be watching the recorded webinar. I want to let you know this is a program that I teach that is EMS focused in this case, but it doesn't have to be EMS focused. All of the tools and techniques that we're going to be talking about apply to not just emergency services, fire, rescue, law enforcement, but really anything that you want to teach. And I find anything that you want to get done with a practical result, quite frankly, once, twice, three times an outcome. So what are we going to do? We're going to build your great objective. I want you to understand that this is an interactive program for those of you who are here live with us right now. Please put stuff in the chat when we go. What you're going to need is a pad and paper to be able to write some stuff down because this is an interactive workshop. We're going to be doing stuff. I want you to at least get those juices flowing. So when we're talking about doing it, you're going to be doing it. That's what we're here for. And I want you to have a phone ready to scan some QRs at the end of the program because I want to be able to bounce you directly to some resources that you can use to get you started. But also a little bit of search engine knowledge is going to be your friend in this case. So what about you? For those of you who are live with us now, who can put stuff in the chat, please do. What do you teach and where do you teach it? That's what we want to know. As I said, this is appropriate across the board for just about any kind of teaching and learning environment, whether it's fire, EMS, what have you. But it helps me to know, those of you that are watching live, what we can focus on in this particular case. That being said, I want to make sure that I want to use specific examples, and we're going to go through a lot of examples of objectives and how to use them, how to take ones that aren't so great and refine them. So we got people teaching at a local rescue squad, the Systems Training Academy. I know that we've got people teaching in a college environment, some initial classes like EMT and paramedic, others focusing more on continuing education and professional development. That's fantastic. See, yep, there we go. Fantastic. So the question rises, what are we doing here? And it's not about what are we doing here, as in what are we teaching? When we're going to develop an objective, when we're going to teach, it's not about us. It's not about the teaching. It can't start there. We're not the hero. I realize sometimes we're on the stage, and I realize this is a format where you literally see me live, right? But it's about what we're doing here. In this case, we're talking about EMS education, but it's about getting it done. Whatever the practical thing is that we're doing, that's the focus of the objective. And if it's the focus of the objective, it's the focus of how we develop the objective. It's the focus of how we teach to the objective. It's focus of how we test the objective. And when we can meet the objective, we get it done here right. The main point that we have to get across and keep in mind, and I realize that if you're watching this, I'm preaching to the choir. Let's think of this as a train the trainer. I want you to be an evangelist for effective objectives, not the garbage objectives that you may have been subjected to before, but real objectives that focus not on the transfer of knowledge. That's not what this is about. This is the application of instruction, and the focus is on the application, getting it done. Whether getting it done is effective airway management, diagnosis of a difficult differential of a respiratory patient. And again, it doesn't matter if you want to go beyond that, whether it's rescue tools and techniques or whatever. Now, a lot of what we look at right now when we're talking about education is classroom education, on-the-job education. We want competency across the board. Very often, and again, I recognize I'm teaching to the choir here, but very often in the classroom, it becomes do what I tell you. And it's about telling, not teaching. Telling isn't teaching. So we want to make sure, because even those of us who don't want to do that, when we're struggling with time constraints, with logistical challenges, sometimes with student behavior, that makes it hard for us to concentrate, that gets frustrating. Even the best educator in the world can sometimes fall back to do what I tell you. But we have to remember telling isn't teaching. The focus is on the performance outcome. The objective meets that performance outcome. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's the classroom stuff. You don't understand. It's dirty, it's salty in the streets, and I'm going to tell you how it's done. I'm going to show you how it happens in the real world. I love people who talk about the real world and the disconnect between the classroom and the textbook and the back of the ambulance and the streets that it rolls down. But on the job training very often isn't too much more than the classroom training in that it's watch me. Instead of, I'm going to tell you, it's watch me, watch me, watch me. Or you're going to go out and do it, and I'm just going to kind of, again, fall back into mini lectures. That's not what it's about. We want stuff that it's competency based. So when the instruction is done, it really affects, in a positive way, patient outcome, right? We want people to be able to say, you've changed for the better. It's student focused, patient centered, and outcome measured. In other words, we're looking at not the textbook or the street or what have you. We need to take a look at, if we're going to educate someone, if we're going to perform instruction, teaching, whatever word you want to use, that we need to decide what the outcome is to start with, where we want to be. And we look at what the incoming students, attendees, EMS providers, whatever you want to call them, shift mates, doesn't matter. Where are they now? Where do we want them to be? Right? Where are they now? Point A. Where do we want them to be? The final objective. And we do a little informal gap analysis. How am I going to get them from here to here? Well, that's where the teaching comes in, right? And the objective, that's the goal. You can't have anything if you don't have an objective. You fall away. They're just the way that they are. And then they're in a room for a while, consuming oxygen and expelling carbon dioxide for the required amount of time until they can sign out. And it doesn't feel like anything changed. And that's why people hate poor instruction. But you're here, you want to make sure that we're not doing it. So we're using objectives because objectives help you determine your performance outcome, develop an effective objective. Once you have that objective and you know what objective is going to meet your performance outcome, the thing you want the students to be able to do, it'll help you decide on your teaching methods. And hey, man, that's going to be based on your strengths, your resources, the stuff you have available, right? And once you've decided on your teaching methods, you're going to be able to demonstrate that performance outcome to deliver better care. Demonstrating the performance outcome, right? Or determine your performance outcome, excuse me. That's often based on JPRs, job performance requirements. Sometimes they're written down. Sometimes we have to look at, not the stuff that like I would really like everybody to know, but we have to look at what do they need to be able to do and how well do they need to be able to do it? Under what conditions are they going to have to do that thing? What resources are we going to give them or are going to be available for them to do it, right? What do you want them to know, do, or feel, right? Because it could be a knowledge, a psychomotor, or an affective thing that we're trying to affect. Do they need to know it? Do they need to be able to do it? Do they need to have a certain attitude towards it? Those are all going to form our objectives. Often objectives are chosen that solve a problem that doesn't exist or grasp an opportunity that's not currently within reach. Sometimes people choose objectives that the students simply aren't going to be able to meet. So it does need to be realistic. And as we go through how we're going to develop objectives, I'm going to have you come up with each component of an objective. So already have your paper out, have a pencil out, make a note on your phone, doesn't matter how you're going to do it. You want to type it in, that's how I often do it. But I want you to start thinking about how this is going to apply to an actual teaching scenario that you have. So when we go to develop an effective objective, we have to think, well, how are we going to be able to tell if they've done it? It has to be measurable. It has to be some kind of a thing that we can see. Bad objectives use words like the student will know. Okay, how am I going to know they know? Oh, well, they're going to pass an exam. Okay, so the student will pass an exam because that's how they're going to demonstrate that they know. If I just say they know, that's what we call a fuzzy objective. I, how am I going to, I'm just going to kind of get a vibe on it that they know it or they don't know it. And here's where we get several disconnects where the instructor gets frustrated because I know I taught it. They heard me say it. I told them to read it. I made them watch the video, but I'm not seeing them pass the test. So it's their fault. It's their problem. When we have an objective that we can measure, right? And we teach to that objective and then we test to that objective, it helps solve that problem. Likewise, we get disconnects when, well, the patients did, or excuse me, the patients, the students did hear me say it. They did read the book. They did watch the video. They did the work, but it wasn't clear to them what they're supposed to do with that. Again, an effective objective that lists what the student is supposed to be able to do with that helps them take the learning in the classroom and demonstrate it when they do an actual skill, when they're out there putting it all together, when they're riding in the back of the ambulance, when they're doing a scenario, when they're whatever it is that you're trying to get them to do. Once you decide on a measurable thing, we have to teach them that thing. Now, it's easy for other stuff to creep in. It's that we're passionate, right? We want to share everything we know. We want to throw in the tips and the tricks and stuff, but that's part of the objective. It's like, look, that stuff is icing. We got to make sure that there's cake in there, right? We have to. We have to decide on the teaching methods that are going to get the students from where they're starting to that performance, that thing that we can watch and measure them do. In between those two things, got to be the teaching methods. Whatever our passion is, whatever our resources are, that's how we're going to get them from here to here and close that gap. And we need to focus just on the objectives. When you're making the objectives and you're thinking, what are the teaching methods I'm going to use? Sometimes, and I've done this too myself, we get passionate about teaching, right? We want to bring in cool stuff and flashy stuff. I'm going to show you this video. Every component of what you teach, you have to look at and go, does that help the students get from where they are to demonstrating the objective? If it doesn't, I don't care how flashy it is. I don't care if it'll make you popular. I don't care if it'll make them laugh. I don't care if it'll break the tension, right? You can't say, I can show you how it's this element of teaching gets them from here to demonstrating the objective, then you got to eliminate it. Even if it's a funny video and you're dying to show it, that's okay. Hey man, save that for the end of class. I'm not saying you can't include it in any way, but that helps us refine it. And man, students will thank you for having the class move along, and they'll feel that they're moving closer to it, and then they'll be able to demonstrate it. Demonstrate that performance outcome. Again, we have to keep focusing on like, okay, well, if it's measurable and it's observable, because we started with that and we taught to that, then ultimately the testing is going to be that, and that's how they're going to deliver better care. So that sounds like a lot, Rom. Where do we begin? Well, we begin with the end in mind. That's what Stephen Covey says. We have to look at what it is we want them to be able to do when we're done teaching, whatever thing that we can measure so that we know it, the students know it, right? Can see it. We can see it. We can document it. And it's not just about documenting, but I mean, it's measurable. We can all look at this thing and objectively go, yep, they did it. We have to start with that. Gagne ask the question, what will the learner be able to do after instruction that they couldn't or didn't do before? I'm just letting you know where I'm getting this stuff from because there's so many great resources out there that focus on exactly this. And I love Yogi Berra. If you don't know where you're going, you might not get there. And man, that absolutely encapsulates it. So Robert Mager is such a great guy with this. I'm going to show you this right here. I literally keep his 6-pack of books on instructional design right here. And the reason that I love them is not only does he really get right down to it, like we're all familiar with the A, B, C, D of objectives. First of all, Mager never did the A, B, C, D. We developed that out of it and kind of customized it. But Mager's objectives in every one of these books is also written not like a textbook. It's written like a, hey, I've been studying instructional design all of my life, and I've come up with this great stuff. And he comes up with little stories and stuff like that. Look, I'm not trying to sell his books. I'm trying to let you know that, man, if you want one-stop shopping for information about this kind of stuff, Robert Mager is the guy. And when you see ABCD, it's based on Mager's work. So this is what it looks like. Given the ABCD format, that's the C, the condition, each educator, that's you, the audience, will draft one effective ABCD objective. That's the behavior. That's the thing we're going to be able to see that you did. And how well do you need to do it? Clear enough to be tested in class tomorrow. That's the degree. Audience, you guys. Condition, using the ABCD format that we're teaching right now. Behavior, one effective ABCD objective, and degree, clear enough to be tested in class tomorrow. So what is this all about? I'm going to review it. And I know that for some of you, this is going to be new. For some of you, this is going to be, I remember about ABCD, but I recognize it, but I couldn't regurgitate it all right now. That's fine. Some of you may be experts in this, but we're going to refine it because I want to look at it in a certain perspective. If you've had ABCD before and you're familiar with it, we're gonna turn it on its head a little bit. But let's start with the basics. Audience, who will perform? Sometimes it's what we say heterogeneous, right? It's all one group. Sometimes it's multiple groups that we have to account for. Behavior, that's the thing that Mager really harped on. What are they going to do, right? What will they do? Condition, where and how are they going to do it, right? Are they going to do it inside, outside, in the rain? Is it always going to be in pleasant conditions? Or sometimes they're going to have to do this under unpleasant field conditions. What resources will they have? Nothing? Reference cards? Just as a quick example, was teaching pediatric cardiac resuscitation improvement the other day. And people were asking about the reference cards. And I'm like, yes, you don't have to memorize stuff that you are definitely going to have a reference card available for, a reference app, or reference whatever the device is. But then you need to be able to practice using it. It has to be available. It has to be deployable. You have to be able to get at it and definitely be able to use it or have a backup. You see what I'm saying? So those are, when we're talking about resources, that's what they mean. And degree, how well do they need to be able to do it? So as I was saying, audience, the heterogeneity, right? Is it one homogeneous group? It's all paramedics of about equal status, roughly? Or is it a mixture of paramedics and EMTs? Is it a mixture of very experienced people and people who are new to the subject? Behavior. Is it formative or summative that we're looking for here? Formative, as we go along, is the individual skills, like small focused components, like starting an IV, whereas summative is the putting it all together at the end of each section, at the end of each chapter, at the end of the class, at the end of the whole program. So summative behaviors are more manage the patient, manage this patient with acute coronary syndrome, whereas a formative assessment might be assemble and put an oxygen unit on a patient. Conditions, real world conditions. We have to be able to get them ready for field conditions. And real world is here, I always say, on that wider spectrum, right? Because on this end, there's like the temperature controlled, well lit, relatively quiet classroom. And on this end is that testing hell that the sadistic instructor is going to do to the student to teach them how it's like in the real world. Yeah, but it's not ever actually going to be like that in the real world, and we're not expecting them to deal with this. So real world is somewhere in here. So don't ever make a student feel like you're setting them up for failure. That being said, it leads us to degree. Are we looking for them to be able to show bare minimum competency? Whatever that is, like this is the bare minimum. They have to be able to do this. We would love them to be able to be up here, but they have to be able to do this. Or is it mastery? It is 100%, 100% of the time. When we're talking about recognizing intubation failures, for instance, the bare competency is mastery. You need to be able to identify it rapidly 100% of the time, as an example. But we need to decide that because it's easy to creep from competency to mastery, and then we're setting an objective that is unrealistic for the student group that we're talking about here. So more specific, let's get more specific about it. The audience will say initial EMT students. The behavior, what are they going to do? They're going to apply a tourniquet. The condition, they're going to be given we'll call it a standard tourniquet. We have to know what tourniquets they're going to be able to operate and what they're not going to be able to operate. If it's a Capt tourniquet, if it's one of the big rubber bands that they wrap around, there's a crazy different number of different ratchet strap tourniquets. We have to decide what kind of tourniquets they're going to be expected to use. Those are the conditions they're operating under, right? And degree, within 30 seconds to stop bleeding, right? If they're going to apply a tourniquet, they have to be able to stop bleeding. So we need to have a way to teach them to stop bleeding. So they get that feedback and they can see when bleeding has stopped, right? And we need to be able to test them in a way that will let them know how bleeding has stopped. With that time limit, they can't take 12 minutes to do it. So we'll say within 30 seconds. An EMT student's going to have to be able to apply a tourniquet, if we give them a standard tourniquet that they've been able to practice on, within 30 seconds to stop bleeding. That's what we want them to be able to do. And if we're happy with that, then that helps guide the techniques we're going to use to teach them that and not beyond. Whatever set of tourniquets we're going to teach them and they're going to be expected to use, we have to be able to give them that or give them the techniques where any tourniquet they're given, they're going to be able to figure it out. We have to decide that up front. Then that's what we're going to teach. And ultimately, that's what we're going to test. We could spin it up. So that was for initial EMTs. This is for credentialed paramedics for continuing education. Say when we're teaching them to move from STEMI criteria to OMI criteria. Credentialed paramedics need to be able to identify OMI alert conditions and activate a cardiac alert. What conditions are they going to do that in? Well, given a patient with acute coronary syndromes and standard ALS gear. The degree, they need to be able to identify that OMI alert condition and activate a cardiac alert, verbalize it, within 60 seconds without reference materials. Now, I'm not telling you need to use this objective, but I'm trying to show you how we might be able to say, hey, experienced paramedics should be able to take the stuff that we've taught them, right? Because if we're deciding they need to be able to do this within 60 seconds without reference materials, then we're going to teach them the stuff they need to be able to do that and move them along, right? That's how we're going to be able to do it. Your mileage may vary. That's why I want to give you concrete examples, but you're going to be developing these yourself. It's all about the verb, okay? The verb is the key to an effective or an ineffective objective that we form on the fly. Now, I like to be able to just write stuff down. I showed you the paper and pencil. I do a lot of writing it down or typing it out on my phone so that as I articulate it, I can kind of break it down. That way I can also share it with people, or it's just the focus of how I'm going to be teaching whatever it is I'm teaching, or how I'm going to be testing whatever it is I'm going to be testing. That verb has to be an action verb, right? It's emergency services. They have to do something, so it's got to be an action verb, ultimately. It has to be measurable. We have to be able to detect it, right? So that the people teaching it, the people learning it, the people testing it can all measure it and know something is going on, that learning has happened. And it needs to be leveled. Here's where we reintroduce or call back to that Bloom's taxonomy, and we'll get more to it. But if we're asking them to do something like, just regurgitate bits of anatomy and physiology, that's a very low level verb, right? To be able to list parts of the anatomy is a very low level verb. We need EMTs, paramedics, whoever you're teaching to be able to operate in field conditions. So those are going to be high level verbs. We'll talk more about that. So here's going to be your homework, and we'll talk more about this at the very end, but I want you to know up front, there's homework that comes along with this. Otherwise, what are we doing here, right? You don't need to just listen to me talk. We need to make it happen in the real world, and that's what all of this is about. I can't tell you that's what's important about objectives, and then we don't do it as part of this program. We need to transform complicated objectives. We need to transform fuzzy objectives. We need to create effective objectives. A complicated objective might be something that looks kind of like this. And you may have seen stuff like this, right? I know I have. And when I'm writing or editing textbook chapters, I see stuff like this. Out, out, out. This is what makes textbooks and teaching objectives painful. Upon completion of this module, the learner will demonstrate a comprehensive understanding of the historical evolution of ambulatory cardiovascular pharmacotherapy, including a detailed comparison of the adrenergic receptor subtypes, primary, secondary messenger cascades, stereoisomeric differences among beta blockers, and the socioeconomic factors influencing the formulary decisions from 1940 to the present day, with an 85% or higher score on a 75-item cumulative examination on a Tuesday in the rain. Well, technically, if you went in there, you could find the A, B, C, D, but that is a garbage objective, right? You can't use this to go, I can clearly see what they are supposed to do at the end. So I understand, if that's what they're supposed to be able to do, that the test has to be them showing they can do that. And the teaching has to prepare them so they can do that. This is garbage. It's got to be streamlined. Now, sometimes there could be a lot of words, especially for those summative objectives at the end. Putting it all together means there's going to be a little bit more info in there, but it shouldn't look like this. Likewise, fuzzy objectives. After today's lessons, students will gain a solid understanding of airway management techniques, feel comfortable with the various pieces of intubation equipment, and appreciate the importance of securing a patient's airway in the pre-hospital setting. Oh, look at that. There's something about knowledge objectives. There's something about psychomotor. There's even something about affective. This must be a great objective. Let's break it down. The behavior is vague. Gain a solid understanding? How can I measure that? I mean, if the understanding, I'm going to be able to measure it because they do something, then just say the thing that they're going to do. Feel comfortable? How am I going to measure that? Not that it's not important. Yeah, I want competence and confidence. But if it's feel comfortable, I need to be able to measure it, quantify it in some way, and appreciate. Okay, but I don't just want them to appreciate. I want them to have the right attitude that leads to the right decisions, that leads to the right behaviors. They sound like good words, and you've probably seen them before, but this is a fuzzy objective. There's no condition. It doesn't say whether this happens in a lecture, lab, simulation, or what tools are available. There's no degree. There's no performance standard. I don't know, are they adhering to a particular protocol, or is that what we're following? Because your objective can reference other stuff. Like if the criteria that a student is supposed to be able to perform to, and I say students capturing everybody, can even be experienced people. But if the reference criteria, right, the standard that they're supposed to be able to perform to is listed in a protocol or somewhere else, you can just reference that standard. We don't necessarily have to put every word in the objective. If you feel like you need to or you want to, okay, sure, man, you do you. But you don't have to. And the performance gaps, learners may feel comfortable, but still not be able to intubate a patient, right? You may want intubation performance here, and they're here, but man, they're happy with being here. Maybe they're okay with that. So they don't even have any kind of motivation to get to where they need to be. That's not going to work. Fuzzy objectives are garbage. So what we want to do with this is upgrade it. And here's how we might change that exact objective. Given a conscious, simulated adult patient, well, they're not really a simulated adult, they're probably a real adult, but they're a simulated patient. So I'll change that next time to adult simulated patient. Be a little more clear, Rom. Given a conscious, simulated adult patient with altered mental status and a stocked glucometer kit, that's all the condition. Here's the stuff that I'm going to wind up putting in front of them. The EMT, all right, in this case, we've identified that we don't have paramedics, we've got EMTs. Will obtain a capillary blood glucose reading. That's the thing I need them to be able to do. So that's what they're going to be tested on. So that's what I need to teach, because we should always be teaching to the test. Understand that when I say that, it's because the test is valid because we're testing the thing we want them to be able to do. I hope that makes sense, Because a lot of people say, we're teaching to the test, but what the real complaint isn't necessarily with the test is that test validly assessing what we want them to be able to do? And how are they going to be able to do it? Within 2 minutes using proper infection control technique, right? They got to be able to get that glucose in 2 minutes using proper infection control technique. So we said it was going to be once, twice, 3 times the outcome. Once, this is your turn. You're going to do this now. Get out your phone that you're going to type into. Get out your pad, your paper, your pen, whatever you're going to do. You are going to create or transform your objective. Maybe you got to create it from scratch. Maybe you got to transform something that's not as good as you would like to be. We have to practice this because that's the whole point of this. If it's not making real world change that's going to help you, what are we even doing here? And that's why you need to be able to do the same with others. When you're doing this as a train the trainer, when you're helping somebody else, when you're showing them this video, understand who is your audience. Just literally pick something. Please pick something. It doesn't even have to be EMS. It could be, like I said, fire, rescue, law enforcement, just something in your personal life, maybe something you want to teach one of your kids, okay? Or somebody else. Who is your audience? Define it. If this is a lesson of some kind, you need a group of people and they're not heterogeneous, right? There's subgroups. In my fire department, the ambulance service where I'm chief, it's going to be EMTs and paramedics with differing levels of experience, but they're all going to work together. And they're all going to have to achieve the same objectives, more or less. And I will try to be very careful to word those objectives so that everyone can achieve it. And if I need to break it out with the EMTs and the paramedics, where we have different expectations for brand new versus experienced people, then we're getting different objectives. Pick anything that you're going to teach. Who is your audience? Write it down. Articulate it. What is the behavior? What is it that you are going to have them do in this class? Excuse me. When I say that, I mean, what is the expectation that they're going to be able to do this thing after the class is over that they couldn't do or couldn't do to that level when your class began? That's the change you make as an educator. What's that behavior? And even if right now you're typing into your phone or you're writing down behavior, question mark, because you got to think about it a little bit more. That's okay. That's okay. But I want you to write that down. Behavior, question mark. I'm going to fill that in later. The conditions. What conditions are they going to be working in? And we want to get as close to a simulation of this as we can, whether it's an individual skill or formative or more of a scenario, a patient case study, summative, putting it all together. Now, that doesn't mean that every single time you have to have a high fidelity patient simulator. It doesn't have to be a $5, $10, or $100,000 mannequin that you do this with. Maybe you can have volunteers. When I'm doing practicals, I like to have other students be a part of it so they can see things from, both the emergency side when they're performing the care and the care side when they're being cared for. But what conditions, right? Think about it. What are they going to have? Where are they going to do it? And then finally, the degree. How well are we expecting them to do it? This thing that you picked, let me ask you, is it basic competency? Like it can't go any lower than this. It's the floor. Or is it mastery? It's the ceiling. It's as high as you can go. That's the degree that we want. Within what you're going to be able to teach, your teaching resources, choose wisely. Again, right now you might write down degree, question mark. Save it for later. But I told you before, it's all about the verb, right? So once you've put together your A, B, C, D, we need to teach to the verb. Well, here's Bloom's taxonomy, right? You've seen this before. The lowest level, they just memorize stuff. They remember. And I'm using the words from the modified Bloom's taxonomy right here. They remember. That's the most basic. once they remember and they're memorizing like the anatomy and physiology or the list of medications, whatever it is, they just it's just information that's in there. They can't do anything with it. But the next step is for them to be able to understand it. Like, oh, okay, I get it. Now they don't just have all the pieces. The pieces start to fit. The gears mesh with the understanding. Then they can start to apply it. Now the gears don't just mesh. Now they're starting to turn. Then a little bit more than that, they can analyze it. Okay. So they could start to use the turning gears, the little machine that they've made, in different ways. Evaluate it, moves it up further where they're able to see how these gears like this might work better like this or better like that. However, they may fit together. And create means we could pull all the parts apart and create a new machine just from parts, or even if we're missing parts. And that's why EMS needs to operate virtually always, any emergency services, all the way to the top at create. So for an individual lesson, you may be further down on Bloom's taxonomy, and that's okay. For formative, right? We may only be able to get them to just remember, and that's all the expectations we're going to have for this part of the lesson. But ultimately, if we want real world performance, we may have to have other lessons that follow that get us all the way to the top. Remember and understand, that's part of the understanding section, right? We're just getting them that. So sometimes we break it down. That's just, I just need them to get them to understand. So the objectives are going to be written and the class is going to be developed for that. Some stuff is the application. Okay, they got that basics down. They built their good foundation. Now I need them to do something with it. So you need to do something with it, right? Could be summative, right? Putting it all together in individual scenarios. And then ultimately, sort of the field experience or the real world, not necessarily making them work under hell conditions that no one would ever work under. Although sometimes, stress can be part of it and we can create challenges for students. Difficult airway programs are built around that, right? That is okay. But the action is all the way at the peak. So let's look at some verbs that we would use to do that. If we're expecting them to remember, then we put the following kinds of words in our objective, right? They need to be able to list. They can list the different structures in the body, the basic anatomical systems, right? The major organ systems. They can list them, or they can identify them, or they can define them. They may not really get it yet, but at least they have that foundational information in. And all of those things I can measure. So I know what to teach. I need to teach them so that they can list it. I need to teach them so they can identify it. I need to teach it so they can define it. And if they can, which is what I'm going to test, then they accomplished the thing I wanted them to do. They started not being able to list, identify, or define, and they ended it being able to list, identify, or define. And likewise, to understand it, well, now they need to explain it or summarize it in their own words or classify things and break them down. Apply? Well, apply it, operate, demonstrate, show me. Analyze it means, okay, now you can use it, but compare or contrast, differentiate. That means there's not always black and white answers. Sometimes it depends on the conditions. It depends on the resources. It depends on preferences. It's a higher level of understanding. So when we put those words in, I need them to be able to compare and contrast. I need them to be able to differentiate between treatments for shockable versus non-shockable cardiac arrest rhythms. If they got to differentiate, then that's what I'm going to test, that they can differentiate. I'm going to test them on how they differentiate that. Then I'm going to teach them exactly that. Not more, not less. If I want them to have more, then that may be a different lesson. But the objectives have to stay focused. Doesn't mean you have to limit your teaching. It means you have to stay focused on each lesson. Evaluate? Well, now they got to prioritize, defend, or justify. Now, when challenged, they have to be able to really analyze at a higher level. And finally, create. They need to construct, coordinate, formulate, develop like a patient care plan or incident command, anything along those lines. They have to be able to do that. And when we move from there up to twice, teaching to the objective. Well, we already talked about that, right? Teaching to the objective. If I'm expecting them to stop bleeding, I may start with a simple demonstration of and their practical hands-on with the types of tourniquets that we have as close as we can. And maybe I say, right now I'm not going to spray blood all over the place. But if the objective is for them to be able to stop bleeding, then I need to come up with some kind of criteria. Maybe we practice with this, but then I put a tourniquet trainer on that actually does squirt blood, right? Just for the last part of it. And that's the feedback they get, and that they know whether they've been able to apply that tourniquet effectively to meet our objective. I know it. Everybody's happy, and we can move on. Even if we couldn't do it the whole way. Maybe leading up to this, I go, well, bleeding control while we're teaching is going to be defined by no slack at all in the tourniquet. But ultimately, we're still pointing to that objective of being able to stop bleeding, and we need to be able to demonstrate that in some way. However, we are going to be able to achieve that with the teaching. So I'm trying to show you how you can achieve some flexibility, but still stay focused on the objective. 3 times. Well, now we're going to assess the objective. If we were going to teach the verb, we have to be able to test the verb. And we already said it, man, formative, skills focused, summative, putting it all together. A formative objective may be something like what you see here. Given a bag valve mask, oxygen reservoir, and a supine adult mannequin, that's what we give them. So those are the conditions they're working under. Each EMT student, that's our audience, will deliver positive pressure ventilations that produce visible chest rise. That's the behavior. What are they going to do? They're going to give PPV that produces visible chest rise. Well, how well? Producing visible chest rise at 10 plus or minus 2 breaths per minute for a full minute with no mask leak. Your mileage may vary, adjust as you want, but that's a formative objective, right? That's not managing an entire patient in respiratory rest. That's not the only thing to it, but that gets our BVM skill. Taking it up a notch, given a high fidelity simulation of a middle-aged chest pain patient with full ALS jump kit, that's what they find. That's the condition. Each paramedic team of 2. Oh my gosh. So we may not be assessing just one person at a time. No, nobody said you had to. What's your audience? That's your audience. We'll assess and treat the patient. Okay. That's a little bit more general, but it's okay because we're catching it in the degree. So what are we supposed to do here? You're supposed to assess and treat the patient. Well, how well? You have to perform all critical actions identified in the ACS protocol in no more than 10 minutes. Okay. So sometimes it may be a little bit to break out exactly what's a behavior, what's a degree. Hey man, wherever you put those lines, I'm not worried about it. As long as all 4 components, and you already get the idea, it doesn't have to be in A, B, C, D order. That's just helping us tell what it is that we need to have. And as we go from the formative objectives, right, the little bits, and we're moving towards the final exam, the summative objective, we're given feedback as we go, right? How well did they meet the objective? Man, did they miss the target completely? Did they hit the target but not the bullseye? Or man, they hit that bullseye and we need to make sure that everybody else sees, hey, did you see how they hit the bullseye? Did you see the bullseye that they hit? Did you see the way they threw? That's maybe your throw is going to be a little bit different, everybody, but we all want to be able to hit the bullseye. So, hey, what are some tips and tricks to be able to hit that bullseye, right? Students go in, and when they're performing their skills or being tested or whatever, they're reacting, right? You give them the conditions and they're reacting. They get through it, and we kind of record that stuff, and they reflect on it. That's where the learning happens, where we say things like, hey, so what happened there? What went, how did you feel about that? Did you feel it was fair? What went really, really well? Like, what would you say? I definitely want to do that again, because there's always going to be something. And if they're hard on themselves, you help them with that, right? What would you like to change? I never say what went wrong. They'll focus on that, but it's not about what went wrong. We don't go backwards to that. We want to go forwards. So I know what happened. You know what happened. What are we going to change? The change is in the education, right? The change is what we need to help them focus on to get better. And they take that and they create rules. That's the big takeaways, right? So what's your take home? What's your takeaway? let's summarize this, right? However we want to say it, they build rules from that experience so that they go back and they can repeat, maybe not the exact same scenario, maybe not the exact same skill, but they have these rules so the next time they react, they're going to be better. That's how objectives help with that. And this is important. The objectives don't mean they have to do it exactly a certain way. They allow the students and us flexibility on testing. Exactly the objective is what they have to meet. How they meet it is going to be up to them. Well, I want them to do it a certain way. Okay, first of all, if you're going to say that, there are all different truths out there that still achieve truth, right? There are different ways of doing it. Is this something you just want a certain way because you just want it? Or can it be different ways? Hey, man, if it has to be a certain way, then that needs to be included in the objective. Make sure that you put it in there. But if the objective here is draw straight lines through all of these dots, okay? Draw straight lines through all of these dots. They can only be straight. They can't be curved. What is the minimum number of lines that you can draw straight line through and hit every dot? Now, so you could go like up and around, across, down, that's 2, over, that's 3, up, that's 4, and into the middle, that's 5, right? So we're looking to draw straight lines. Now, some of you may have seen this before, okay? I could do it in 4. 4 is a good number. That's a good, all right, I see. 4, you did well. You go outside the box and you don't have to do it in 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good. We set the objectives. I set the objectives for you. But some people may say, well, that's cool, but I did it in 3. Oh, man, but you like went way outside. I don't know. Is that fair? I don't know. Is it? You tell me. What if somebody came to you and said, I could do that in 1, and they just drew one big line? People are going to freak out. They're going to be like, you can't draw one big line. Oh, can't they? Why can't they? Maybe sometimes as educators, we learn like, okay, I got to make a note of that. And I got to put that down for the objective for next time. And I got to explain why we can't. That's how we learn and get better too. We want to invite students to create and operate at that top level of Bloom's taxonomy, because that's not just how they get better. It's how they have to be able to perform, and it's how we all get better. That's how we invent things. Maybe they go, you know what? I'm going to go around and around and around. Still just one. Shoop, shoop, shoop. You can't go around. Okay. Well, what if I move all of the dots and I just draw one line straight across? You can't move the dots. Can't they? I don't know. If they can't, then let's explain why they can't. And we're going to have to modify our objectives in the way we teach. And we have to explain it to them. But don't stop students from jumping to the top of that Bloom's taxonomy and creating. So here's your homework. Once you need to write it, okay? This is for you. Take a screenshot if you need to. Take a picture of it if you need to. Given the ABCD worksheet that we've been demonstrating, each EMS educator is going to draft one ABCD objective for a lesson they currently teach, containing all 4 parts with no element missing. You're not just going to write it, though. You got to teach it. Given the resources in this webinar, each educator will outline at least one instructional activity that supports their objective. One activity that supports the objective that you just wrote and can be delivered within your existing time and resource limits. Do it before the end of the week. And then we're going to assess it once, twice, 3 times. Given the assessment design stuff that we put together, each educator, that's you, will create one assessment item, a quiz question, a skills station, a scenario, whatever it is, that validly measures the behavior of that objective that you wrote, and share it in the chat or for follow-up. Now, I said I was going to give you resources. Here's one of the best, and I get it. It's 23 years old. But this is a NAEMSE educator resource that I still go to. The National Guidelines for Educating EMS Instructors. It also has good information about objectives. The fundamentals are there. And I'm not just doing this because it's a NAEMSE webinar. It's because it's good fundamental stuff. And I still go there and find stuff that's useful. Absolutely, positively. Here's another one. American College Health Association Guidance for Designing Successful Learning Objectives. It's good stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there. If you just type in to an AI agent or a search engine, anything about improving your learning objectives, you're going to get a lot of good information. These are some of the ones I recommend. The Johns Hopkins Writing Effective Learning Objectives and Educational Objectives has a lot of good stuff on the verbs at different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. It's all good stuff. It leads to the outcome. Here's the thing. You set one objective. That's the hurdle that we have to set so that's the right height, the right size, in front of the patient, practical, applicable. That's what our objective is. So that's what we're going to prepare the students to be able to overcome. And that's going to be the ultimate test. And sometimes there's going to be a bunch of objectives that they're going to have to be able to overcome ultimately to do their thing. And we're going to be that guide on the side. We're going to be their coach. We're going to be helping them go over it. We're going to teach them how to do it. We're going to tell them about it. Sure, maybe we got to demonstrate it and jump over those hurdles ourselves. But ultimately, we're the guide on the side helping them do it. If they're not doing it, what are we doing here? Because ultimately, what they're going to be able to do is succeed. And they're going to be able to succeed because you, as an educator, were able to develop an effective objective. Take a complicated objective, take a fuzzy objective, make it better, build one from scratch. And that's how you're a force multiplier and how we take those objectives that we take maybe even from the book, right? From the demo. And those are the first steps. And those steps take us through the classroom and inform the way that we teach, because we teach to the objective. We've decided what they need to be able to do, and we're going to be able to help them do it so that ultimately when they have to do the test, we're testing to the objective that we taught to the objective, because the objective ultimately is for improved patient care, performance in the field. That's what it's all about, because a webinar is not what it's about. A test is not what it's about. Performance in the field is what's all about. And I realize that we're at the end of our time, but I'm more than happy to entertain any questions that you have either in the chat or in the Q&A. And don't forget, my parents named me Rommie Duckworth. If you Google Rommie Duckworth or Rom Duck, I'm the only one that you're going to find on the internet. Not many people can say that. Thanks, Mom and Dad. So you can get a hold of me, and I want to hear from you. You got more tips for me? Man, I want to know it. I want to do it. I want to be able to share it with others. You got a question for me? I can hook you up directly with an answer. I will do it. I can hook you up with somebody who can answer it better than me. I'm going to do it, because we are the educators. We're the force multipliers. We're the leaders. We're the ones who are going to take things into the future, and that's how we're going to do it. So I thank you for attending. And I'm looking over here because that's where your questions are. All right, I'm going to jump over. And I'm not seeing any major questions. And I know we want to be able to end on time, and we're at the end of our hour. So I will repeat to you, I am Rom Duckworth, Rommie Duckworth, Rommie, Duck and Worth, just as it sounds, Duckworth. Type that into your local browser and you will find me.